Hello, welcome to this video. This is coverage for round 6 of the London Chess Classic, or the Berlin Chess Classic, as someone yesterday jokingly remarked. Well, it's not so much this round. It's we've got just one Berlin in this round, so you can be glad about that, I guess. So let's see what happened in round 6. We start with Giri Carlsen. Giri, one of the co-leaders of the event, with a somewhat modest +1, one win, no loss. Many draws in this event, but I mean, it is not a super exciting event that we have to be honest about, but lots of the draws have been coming from interesting games. So it's not that everything was just dull and uninteresting. Okay, Giri is on +1, and Carlsen, the world champion, has got 5 draws. So he definitely needs to win a game somewhere. But Giri with black, difficult. Yeah, Giri never loses anyway, so we'll see. We got a 1e4. Giri is playing all openings, and so also the Ruiz on the menu, but it's a normal line. Let's say normal, with a6, not the Berlin. And an interesting moment comes here. Carlsen castles, which can mean that he's really ready to play the martial attack after a possible c3 and d5, which he has done in the past, but not as a regular weapon. Or he might just bluff with castles and then play d6 and go back to a regular line. In any case, Giri now goes d4. That was his preparation for this game. d4 is an interesting sideline here, after which black has a very principled choice. He can stay, let's say, within grounds of the anti-martial, play something unique with knight takes d4, which can lead to very interesting complications after white can take on f7. It's a very weird line, but black has very nice compensation in this position. Or, which is probably better, white can take and go e5, which leads to a position with white having some advantage, space advantage in the center. Something like this is even possible, but black has a decent counter chance, and he's got a pawn. So this is an alternative here for black, but Carlsen went d6. This is the solid move, and in a way I think also maybe the more interesting move, because it doesn't simplify the position. Now we get to the so-called Yates variation that can also arise from d6, c3, castles, d4. So for white players, this is a universal weapon that you can play against the martial move order and the regular move order, let's say. Okay, we got this, and Carlsen now goes bishop g4, pinning this knight, putting some pressure on the center. Bishop e3, and now black goes for this kind of operation, winning a tempo on that bishop. b2 also was hanging, and now c5. This is one of the main lines against the Yates system, and also what I play with black. I face this quite frequently in blitz chess, that d4 line. So we get this position, and here knight bd2 was played. Another way of playing this, or let's say here, and somewhere around here white has the choice if he wants to just continue to develop, or if he wants to play d5 at some point. That idea to play d5, I don't think it's particularly effective here, but just a general kind of idea, leads to a Benoni type of structure, interestingly enough, and is can get quite sharp, especially if white gets in h3 and g4. It didn't happen in this game because after queen b1, g6, Carlsen took on d4, and this is now a very solid position for black. He's got no particularly bad piece. Knight on b6 isn't that well placed, but other than that, the bishop on f6 is good. d6 cannot put under pressure, and white's pieces also don't look so beautiful. In the game we got a regrouping. Rook f1 threatened f4, so black went back to f6. And here white has finally kind of untied his queen side. However, after this, there was knight d3. An interesting move to simplify stuff and get rid of that knight. Now, black has a very active yeah, queen and bishop here on that diagonal. And I think this is enough for black to have completely equalized. We saw around here, they repeated a bit, but Giri decided to play on with bishop d2. I got the bishop pair after all, but black, as mentioned, is very solid. A good thing for black is that his pieces are nicely coordinated. Queen and bishop are very well coordinated. The queen is protecting this and the knight is protecting this. So it's a very, very difficult thing for white to make any progress against this kind of setup. Now we had this trade, and now after white has taken on c5 and will take a6. Here they already could have agreed to a draw, but they continued a little bit without changing the assessment in any way.
Check.
In the
Check.
final position here, when they agreed to draw. I mean, the position is so drawn that white would even draw. He's a pawn down. White would even draw if he just puts the king on h1 and gives up both pawns. It's still drawn three pawns down. This is how drawn it is. I mean, just for fun, I'm going to show that line, like here. Like, I mean, it doesn't make any particular sense. I just want to show the general idea. We have this situation that the king is here on a light square in the corner. It's the wrong bishop, so everybody knows that it is a draw with just those pieces, bishop on e3 and pawn on h5, because there's no way for black to get the king out of the corner. And there's absolutely no difference here, as there are two pawns. The black can have like 6 pawns on the h file. It's still a draw. And here white can very easily just wait until black goes c4 and then have the draw here. Yeah, so it's a total draw at the end. Let's look at Nakamura Aronian next and see what happened here. Yeah, not a Berlin. That's good. But we got a Catalan. Yeah, the Catalan is a very good opening for white, quite clearly, because it is solid. It's hard to lose a game, but you will definitely win games because you have often some kind of nagging pressure. This line with a4 currently is in fashion. Aronian goes with rook a6. That is a move that surprised us quite a bit in the commentary. I did the live coverage yesterday for the ICC together with Grandmaster Joe Benjamin. I mean, I probably should reverse that because Joel is doing most of the work. I'm the host for the show, and I make the odd suggestion, but he's the main analyst. Yeah, that surprised us, that rook maneuver, but it's funny when I checked it afterwards with the computer. It's one of the main moves given by Stockfish, so the computer is also suggesting that somewhat weird rook maneuver. But if the rook cannot be harassed anyway on b6, it's not such badly placed. I mean, it attacks a pawn. So queen retreated, 97, rook d1, all kind of normal, and now bishop f3. That's an important move. Black has to be aware that if white gets to play e4, then d5 will put that bishop in a difficult spot. So you should just give up that bishop and then play c6. Yeah, this is now a super solid structure. c6, d5, e6, f7, something that is well known from some lines of the Slav defense or the Carlsen. In fact, this kind of position could have easily come from a mainline Slav where black has traded the bishop via g4, let's say, and get to the structure in this kind of way. Queen c2, interesting moment. If white goes e4, which he would like to do, there's knight takes e4, the typical tactic, as here the queen is hanging with jack. So queen c2 in preparation for e4, and now after the knight move, this trade happened. Yeah, and here I think black can already be quite satisfied. He's got rid of the bishop pair. The rook on b6 is not badly placed, and he's getting e5 in. Yeah, that maneuver knight a2, queen c3, it looked at this weakish pawn on a5, but black can cover it. Anyway, black gets e5 in, and this is quite nice now. White now either has to accept that black gets rid of the d-pawn and gets possible squares for his knight, or he has to let black take on d4 and recapture with the pawn. And that cannot be great, this kind of isolated pawn. So he decided to capture, and now we got this this endgame position. Yeah, here we expected the move e4 in the, sorry, I was too quick, the move e4 during the broadcast, and we thought that maybe white is a little bit better because he gets in bishop g2 and f4. However, we didn't see a particular idea. Bishop g2 and then g5. That is a very cool move suggested by the computers. It's pretty strong because f4 now is not good. This is too weak. And if white cannot go f4 in this position, it's difficult to make any suggestion how to progress. If black gets in like knight g6, possibly knight e5, he's in very good shape. Don't underestimate that queen side is rather weak. b2 is weak, and a4 is also potentially weak. So that didn't give white anything, that bishop g2 e4 idea. He played this move, nothing that we had on the radar at all. But yeah, attempted Aronian to take. It wasn't necessary to take. I mean, black can also continue with moves like g6 and so on, but I think he concluded that this is okay for him and didn't look so much for alternatives. Yeah, I mean, b6 will win that pawn, or in this case, give black an interesting pin on the d file. Yeah, black is definitely out of the woods, and the way it happened, he now had this knight c5 threat. Yeah, here Nakamura thought for quite a bit, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was this position, yes. And he went for king g2. And after here, we have this long
check
line that leads to simplification. b3, knight here, and knight e5. Yeah, and now white is threatening to go with rook c7. And there is not much that black can do. Knight d3 for further simplification, and now b4. That's basically the end of this game as as being interesting. White now trades off his final pawn there, and here he gets the b pawn back. They agreed to a draw right here. So we have two draws in those games, Aronian Nakamura and Giri Carlsen. Not very eventful, but you cannot really blame the players. It's kind of a normal thing that sometimes happens. Black equalized with an interesting idea or with solid play, and not much happened. All right, so let's have a look at MVL Caruana next. And in this game we got the Berlin, but just this one game. Okay, we have the end game.
check
And b6 here played by Caruana. What I learned by looking at the database, the main move seems to be h5 in this position nowadays. This is also what we had seen earlier in the event. I must admit that I have forgotten in which game, but it was played earlier in the event. b6 is a different idea. Black puts the bishop on b7. This is not something that is so commonly seen in the Berlin, as it kind of neglects the e6 square. This is an interesting way of playing. e6 often is a problem for black, even with the bishop on c8, that the position gets opened on the king. The way it turned out, though, I mean, Caruana was playing very quickly, as we see here with the clock times. This was obviously all prepared.
check
And when I looked at this afterwards with the database, it turned out that this position has been played before in a correspondence game, at least in one correspondence game. Yeah, part of Caruana's preparation, while MVL was spending quite some time already, which is an important factor later. Yeah, so what about this position? Black has now this king on f7, which is a little bit insecure. It can get,
Check.
like here, harassed by checks. On the other hand, black has gotten rid of this obstructing pawn on e5. And if he gets to activate his bishop here, like with c5 and centralize, it shouldn't be too bad. We shouldn't be underestimating that this knight on c3 is pretty badly placed. It looks at protected squares on d5 and b5 and on e4, so it doesn't do much. All in all, it's probably a relatively equal position, but still something that is kind of interesting the next couple of moves. First, they repeated this once, and then a4. a4 is interesting in regard that, okay, white is intending to go a5 if possible. a5 by black, and this is an interesting idea for from white's point of view to provoke the move a5, because in some cases there might be tactics related to the pawn on b6. How would that work out? Let's have a look. I mean, this was played now, and king here. I just want to show you a line that does not work at all, but this is a kind of idea that sometimes is in the position. Knight d7 check. If black now just, I mean, this is a really terrible move because after king e6 this is trapped, but the general idea is that if black goes somewhere here, then you can sometimes take here because of that insecure position now of the knight. This is only possible with a4 and a5 inserted. Even that isn't clear because of rook d8 that knight has no square, but it is the idea that gets introduced to the position with flicking in a4 and a5. In the game,
check.
f4 was played here by MVL, and note that he's 1 hour down on the clock. This is an important part of this whole thing. What should black do now? I think Caruana now played it precisely. He played rook c to e8. I'm sorry, c to e8. We in the broadcast we were thinking that black probably would put the rook on the d file, but this isn't so great because rook d3 and a possible rook d1 later would introduce pinning ideas on the d file, or knight e4, let's say. You don't want to bring yourself into a pin. Rook to e8. Instead, what Caruana played is just stronger. Yeah, now rook d3 played by MVL. It's interesting that now Caruana had an active possibility that he did not play. He played the move g6 also really quickly. I'm not sure. It can really be part of his preparation. It's not completely impossible. The thing is, the engine gives g5, and I mean, it looks a little bit outrageous, but it's kind of interesting, that move. I mean, not that g6 is bad. It's just that this is an interesting alternative. And it asks white what he's going to do next. I mean, black wants to take that pawn. And, well, if you check here, something like this is not going anywhere. I mean, white is not in trouble or so, but, I mean, something like this, for example, is probably turning out okay at the end. But it's still interesting to pose some problems here for white. If we go back here, g5, white can go g3, but here I think black is quite happy as he can use that g file, and if c5 comes, that's a good diagonal. So g5 looks interesting. It's a bit of a shame that g6 was played so quickly. It's a solid move, everything's good, but g5 was a bit more interesting. Rook e1 now, that looks normal, support that knight. King g7, that was the idea obviously. And now knight e4. Yeah, white attacks that knight on d6, and if black takes it, rook d7 is going to win for white. So black had to play this move. And now interesting move by Maxime, rook e to d1, just letting this knight be there for the taking, but black cannot take it. That we should check quickly. Yeah, now
checkmate.
Yep. So that's not going to work. But black also, if he goes back somewhere here, rook c7 is going to win as this is pretty awkward. Those pieces are not... I did paint them, yes. Are not really well coordinated. White gets one piece back with a great position. So black cannot capture, but he can go here, and then we still get this kind of pinning situation on the d file that I was talking about earlier. Yeah, and now the question is, what is White supposed to do? I mean, he has a draw in hand, and this is with knight g5. The thing is, he's got 25 minutes for 15 moves, and what he did at the end, he took that draw, unfortunately. Yeah, we had this repetition now for a draw. So, can White continue? Yeah, he definitely can. I mean, if we go back, White can definitely continue, but it's not that it is super promising anyway. What he could have done is, let's say a move like h4. I'm just continuing here. So c5 maybe, freeing that, knight c3. And then let's say rook f8 or so. This is a position that, of course, can be played by White. Maybe he was a little bit, concerned about his time situation, that he was down more than, what is it, like 50 minutes. This is, well, it's not very comfortable. No, 40 minutes, I'm sorry. No, it's 50. I cannot calculate. Maybe that was a little bit too uncomfortable for MVL here, and he decided to be content with the draw. It's still a bit of a shame. You could have continued. It's not like it's a dead draw or anything like that. It's one of those cases where, I mean, there are other cases in the event where I think a draw was completely justified, but here White could have certainly continued. But the time is a factor. Okay, so let's have a look at Topalov Adams next. Topalov has a really rotten event. Yeah, -3 and lots of unlucky games where he could have drawn instead of losing the game, win instead of drawing, and so on. So let's see what happened here. We've got a Queen's Gambit declined and Bishop f4. Yeah, that's a line that I have some experience with both colors actually. So we'll get something very standard. h6 is an interesting move. Normally black here opts for the immediate bishop moves, but h6 it makes quite some sense. It's often useful anyway, and White now has no better move than bishop d3 in the first place. So now bishop a6 gets traded, and this is basically how they play it with black, this kind of setup. And it's not the most exciting opening anyway, but it is sound and solid. It's something that I prepared a couple of years ago for games in league matches where I'm playing strong opponents and where I want some kind of a solid foundation to start with. Topalov's idea here, knight e1 and knight c2, is quite interesting. Those knights have posts that make sure that there is no invasion on the a file by the rooks. That's kind of interesting. And he then plays in the center. Quite an interesting plan. It seems that it leads to some good fighting chances. And in the actual game, we see that Adams goes for that counter strike here with e5 in the center. Yeah, here we expected a bishop retreat in the broadcast, bishop h2 or bishop g3, but Topalov surprised us with just taking. It seems that he really was out for a fight here. Bishop h2 or so was about equal, I guess. But here that leads to an interesting kind of position. Like this, knight d4. What White is trying to do is he tries to pressurize those two pawns. And on the other hand, e5 is kind of weak, can be attacked, and it gets very interesting now. This was played by Adams, rook c1, and here he decided to capture. An interesting possibility here was bishop to a3. It looks like knight d5 is an interesting move now. This situation. Very tough to evaluate. White has two pawns for the exchange, but black gets an active rook here. That was an interesting alternative, bishop a3. Not sure if Topalov would have given the exchange. I mean, he really loves to do that. He has, it's one of the most, he's a player, probably the most, the player of the modern times who has sacrificed most exchanges. It was interesting, but Adams played in a more solid fashion. He took and played bishop c5. I think that's also not a bad decision at all. Yeah, he simplified, regrouped the knight, and had a look at those pawns. There are also some targets. So those are targets, but of course those pawns are not easy to play with as well. Note that white cannot take on d5 due to the pin on the d file. Yeah, this was played just doubling on the c file. This. And now rook a6 was played. Yeah, and this is probably not a good idea. Yeah, if black goes knight e7 here to cover that, he's probably slightly worse. I mean, I would really prefer white here a little bit, because c6 is easier to play against than f4. But it's not a matter of yeah, good or bad. It's just what you had to do. What Adams played here had a big drawback. Rook a6, knight d4. He went now knight e7. Yeah, and now knight b3 was played. And this is the biggest family fork ever. Yeah, family is wrong, but one queen, one rook, and another rook. And this is an interesting thing. If you threaten a fork on 3 heavy pieces, it's impossible to avoid. Yeah, I mean, you can only move one of them away. And as Adams later admitted, he had completely overlooked that possibility. And it's a very human move to overlook, because the knight is so nicely placed on d4, putting pressure on c6, covering f5. It doesn't feel right to retreat it. But, well, if it wins material, it's of course right. And here, this is just winning the exchange. So, Topalov grabbed that exchange, played g3. f4 was hanging, so it makes lots of sense. Now g5. Black needs counterplay. If he just sit there doing nothing, he will just be the exchange down. And here white is basically forced to take. And now Topalov played rook e1. He took about 5 minutes here. He had 30 minutes on the clock. And it turns out that this is the second critical position of the game. The first being, yeah, the one where Topalov gave the exchange, or sorry, where Adams blundered the exchange. Rook e1. It looks like the most normal move ever, but it seems that it is a mistake. But this is very, very tough to see beforehand, how tricky it gets after this move. It seems that one of the computer suggestions, like queen c3 or queen e3, that cover the pawn, are better. But it's very difficult. It's really very difficult to see why rook e1 should be bad. We will see what happened. Rook e1, knight g6. And the thing is, this is attacked, of course. And it's very difficult for white to now just protect the pawn. How would you do it? How would you do that? If you play queen e2, for example, then black will take anyway, as that rook is hanging. And the knight here on e5 now is absolutely fantastic. It covers here and it attacks here, which is the most important thing. This is even possible, as there's always the queen on c2. It's really awkward now. How do you cover that? Topalov relied on that move. He was certainly thinking that he wins with this. e6, f takes, rook c6. This is what happened. But now knight e5. And what are you doing now? It hangs, and this hangs, and it's a huge fork. In both on both sides we have big forks. This is hanging, and with it the whole position. It's really, really crazy. And the craziest part is that now, I mean, the most obvious, let's say, first move that comes to mind here is rook takes e5. I think queen takes, check,
check,
king somewhere like here to f7. I don't know, something like that. It's that if white, let's say, goes here, yeah, and this looks terrible. There's queen h7, the rook here. This king is kind of insecure. That black is just playing the super calm move, king g7, and it seems that there is nothing that white can do. It's really funny. Check here. Black goes up, and white. Okay, white can always draw by taking the rook, but that is an immediate draw. It's a perpetual on white's king. It's an amazing situation. White has absolutely no way after knight e5 to to trouble black. That is just an amazing threat. Topalov played the check and tried rook f1. But this after knight takes again is no way of winning. White had to take, queen takes, and queen c2. That is what he tried. Again, angling for checks here and attacking the rook. But black is just calmly playing king g7. We know that idea already. And it's really funny. White has no way forward. If he goes check here, black just steps up. And here white has no checks. Okay, he's got that check. But then I go d4. And this is the situation where white, I mean, probably earlier on, but here you definitely start to worry with white. You are pawn down. And if you don't have a mate or some kind of decisive action against the king, how are you going to continue that game? So it was really, it was a shame for Topalov. He had to take that rook and accept the draw. So he really has a bad event. Sometimes you just are in some kind of tournament where nothing ever goes right for you. Whenever you do it, there's some kind of drawback, some miracle escape, some kind of weird resource that you did not see. And not winning this after Anand's blundered the exchange is a big shame. This was the moment. Rook e1. It's the most normal move ever, but it seems that it really gives away half a point. Okay, so we've got the fourth draw here in a row in that event, in this round. So let's go to the fifth game, Giri Anand. So let's see, 1c4. So no Berlin. Yeah, and in fact, no theoretical discussion at all, as Giri is just going 2d3. Yeah, this has no particular point or anything. It's just a move that says, okay, let's just play some chess. Let's not play some kind of preparation. Yeah, Anand pretty quickly decided to play this setup, a reversed Grand Prix. This is not a bad choice. The most dangerous weapon that white has against its setup is an early d4, and now, well, with d3 already being played, that is kind of out of the picture. I'm talking about things like this, for example. This is something that white definitely likes to play, and the way that game here unfolded, it makes no sense at all for white to play d4. So f5 is not a bad move. So all that is kind of normal. Check. And now check on b4. So black gets this bishop traded.
Check.
And then plays d6. Yeah, very logical. Trade that bishop and then put the pawns on dark squares so that this is a decent piece. The bishop on e7, let's say here, would just be bad. So all that is kind of normal. And now Giri went knight d5. Yeah, here Anand decided to capture that knight. To capture that knight on d5. It wasn't forced or anything, but it's always a little bit annoying to have that piece on d5. I think Anand wanted some clarity of the structure. This, and here, I mean, there are interesting alternatives now for white. If you go, let's say, rook c1, then black can try c6, trying to get a position a position like that, where I think black has nothing much to fear. Grishuk tried something interesting. He played queen to b4. That's a very direct move. Attacks that pawn on b7. And yeah, interesting moment now for black. He had a couple of alternatives, but ultimately decided to take that pawn on d5. It looks risky at first, because well, white can set up a pin. However, bishop e6 is saving the day here. White can try knight g5, for example, but this is at the end
Check.
not leading to anything. This is just completely equal. So this is why Grishuk took on b7. This is the more interesting move. c6 basically had to be played. And now white has to, here, knight d2, knight b6. Now white has to worry a bit about the queen. Queen only has one square on a6, so he steps out before something bad happens. Yeah, so what about this position? I actually thought during the broadcast that white is slightly better because those pawns look weak. c6, d6, they look a little bit weak. And white's... yeah, I think white has a little bit of pressure against those pawns. In the game, Anand went d5. It's a tough decision to play that move because you weaken c5 and e5 quite a lot. But maybe you had to. Yeah, c6 was under some pressure. I think that black is probably okay, but there is one particular moment where I think Anand goes wrong. King h8, that was an interesting moment. Here g5 was a suggestion during the broadcast. And I think that it's kind of interesting, that move. Black is just going for it on the king side. During the broadcast I actually thought that white is better after d4, but maybe that is not true. Takes and then queen back, and that pawn, it looks like it falls. And if white gets that pawn, just like that, he also has an advantage, as g5 has mostly weakened black's king position. But rook e8 is, oops, I'm sorry, that was wrong. Rook e8 is a decent alternative now, because if knight d4, knight c4 is quite annoying. Yeah, white has no good square now for the queen, really. Yeah, okay, can go to c3, but this is not very exciting for white. Maybe g5 was an alternative. It wasn't bad, it seems. King h8 is kind of, don't know what to do move. b3. And now the next move is definitely a mistake by Anand. He goes bishop g4. And after that, it seems that white definitely has an edge. Queen c3. Now this is a double attack against those pawns. And black now, whatever he does now, he will have some sort of disadvantage. I think he probably should have taken on f3. That's the best option now, even though after this white is still a little bit better, of course. Yeah, those pawns are again more weakness than any kind of strength, and white has ways to pressurize them. Some queen a5, looking at that pawn, for example. A couple of ideas. And in general, you don't like to give that bishop there against the knight on f3. But he probably had to do it. This is what Anand played, but after takes, knight d4, white now has a pretty substantial advantage. That is very weak, and the knight on d4 is a fantastic piece. He maybe relied on this, that f3 move, that now the bishop is bad here on h1. But this is just a temporary thing, while this is permanent. We will see what I'm talking about. Before, yeah, fixing that weakness. Knight a4, and after this we see that white is able to force a trade of h pawn against f pawn, and this is a pretty terrible endgame for black. c6 is just completely weak, and there is no compensation for that. In the game it really turned out to be, yeah, super uncomfortable. This was played d4. Yeah, Grishuk had little time, so he had to play quickly. Yeah, knight c4 is an interesting try here by Anand, posing problems. Wants to get rid of this knight on e5, and this is what happened. It's a pawn, of course. Yeah, black has given up a pawn, but he has activated his position quite a bit. So rook c5, rook d4.
Check. Check.
Yeah, so let's have a look at this endgame from here. Yeah, white is a pawn up and he's got the better structure. So it should be a straight win for white. However, things are not that easy. During the broadcast, we had huge problems in really proving a white win. And it turns out that in the game, it also got very tricky. I mean, white has a couple of alternatives along the way, but
Check.
let's have a look what happened. Here, bishop d5, threatening mate. This. Yeah, and now white has no big choice. He has to take. And this is a very interesting endgame. It looks like a total simple win. White is a pawn up, better structure. This is about to fall. But what we should not underestimate, black is active. The king is coming into e4 and the d-pawn is running. It's not easy at all. Rook a7 now and d4. And we absolutely could not prove a win during the broadcast. And I also looked at this a little bit with the computer afterwards, and I also couldn't come to a clear conclusion if this is a win for white or a draw. I mean, it should be a win by all kinds of, by on general grounds or whatever you may call it. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that black should be able to draw, but he definitely has chances to do so. We can have a look at a couple of lines. Here, one line that we looked at in the broadcast was white pushing the a-pawn. I think white has winning chances here, but it's very difficult to get to a conclusion, as I said. a5 here, a6. This kind of variation is surprisingly tricky for black. Yeah, here in this line, white gets to this endgame, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure if this is a draw or win. Maybe if you are an endgame expert and have time on your hands, please let me know. I'm not 100% sure, and my time is a little bit limited for that video, so I didn't want to invest like an hour or so to figure that out. Maybe it's easier to figure out, and you can just know the answer, but I wasn't sure. And I'm not sure that the line that leads to it is entirely forced, but that was an alternative for white. The thing is that the way it was played, there was one moment where Anand definitely could have drawn. It's really funny. In the game, Grisho played b5. It's also the more normal move, let's say. Rook b2, and now a4 was played. And after that, Anand can draw. He absolutely is able to draw this game. If instead, what is an alternative, let's say? I looked briefly at rook b7 here, d3, b6, rook b1, preparing d2, d1. Let's say check.
Check.
b7, d2, a4. Yeah, the funny thing is that it's all about this thing.
Check. Check.
Yeah, king up. This, and I think this is a draw. Black should be able to draw this by some kind of counter attack on the white king. But again, this is something that I'm not 100% sure about. Black can also, instead of like here, d2, a4, he can also do this first. Maybe this is the wiser decision to try to trade or let white take, because I think here the chances for a draw are somewhat higher. Yeah, it's a very tough end game, but it's interesting to see that normal move a4, that in fact is a draw, amazingly enough. It's just that Anand didn't find it. Yeah, Anand played the move king d3, and d3 seems to be a draw, even though it's hard to believe, but it's just what that's the result of looking at this with the computer. And the computer is if you look at this a little bit, I mean, the human combined with the computer here leads to an almost perfect evaluation, because you have the pure calculating power of the engine, and you have the human looking at a couple of critical positions where the engine sometimes is not 100% correct, because it doesn't see a particular kind of fortress or things like that. So yeah, I think this is a draw. b6, rook b1, or also Stockfish thinks it's a draw. I mean,
Check.
must be correct there. Yeah, this is I think ultimately, I'm sorry, that was the wrong move. I just screwed up my notes. b6, a4, d3. Yeah, b6 just gets taken, of course. It's rook d7, I'm sorry. Rook d7. Yeah, and now just a move like this. And it's quite funny, what is white supposed to do now? Yeah, if you move one of the pawns, it just gets taken. You cannot activate the king in any way. So what is your move? It's very strange. You can look at various ways to give up one of those pawns, but it doesn't lead to anywhere. If white is just doing that, well, black is going here. And again, you cannot move one of the pawns. It's really weird. I don't see how white can make any sort of progress here. If you give up this pawn, let's say, I'm taking this, and rook a5. I don't see how this is a win. It's quite funny. Well, after d3, it seems to be a draw. At least that's what the computers say. Okay, but Anand didn't do that. He played king to d3, rook b7, rook a2, and now b6. This is the problem. In this position, black has no defense anymore. I mean, the king is blocking his pawn. So now after, let's say, rook b4, white goes b7, and this is the problem. The king cannot move. There's always a check and the promotion, and this means that black can just stay, and now white just brings the king. This here and f4, and that's the end of it. It's basically a Zugzwang. White will win this. So it wasn't, I mean, it's still slightly mysterious, because king d3 very clearly loses. So you should have to, you just have to try d3. And it was a draw, funny enough. Very tricky rook endgame there, that if you have some time on your hands, you can definitely explore deeper than I did now in that video. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the coverage here of round 6. The overall standings are quite funny. We've got 4 players with +1, Grishuk, MVL, Nakamura and Giri. Then a bunch of people with 50%. Anand is on -1 and Topalov is on -3. So even with just 3 rounds to go, basically anybody can win the event. And round 7 sees the game Carlsen Nakamura, one of the modern classics. Let's see if the world champion can win against his, yeah, maybe not, I'm not sure if it's his favorite opponent, but Nakamura has a terrible score against Carlsen, never won a classical game. So let's see what Magnus can do there. Okay, well, thanks for watching.